Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a News Forum special report. I'm Vonny Sweetland, and as we continue our journey on the subject of advancing Canada's Black community, we're here with a very special guest, co-founder of Black Urbanism Toronto, Dane Williams. Good morning, Dane. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Vonny. Glad to be here this morning.
Yes, beautiful, beautiful morning. Happy to have you on. We had you on in a previous episode, and I think the consensus was we had to have you back.
Yeah, you know what? And I like to talk a lot, so I'm really happy to be back here today.
Well, Dane, perfect. You've spoken in the past about the importance of protecting local communities. I know you grew up in Toronto's Little Jamaica, where you're seeing some gentrification, and this has been going on for quite some time. We know that there's Metrolinx who's doing development in the area. Can you walk us through what that looks like and where some of your concerns might be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think for us, it's really, one as a resident and, long stayer in Little Jamaica. For us, it's the focus is on like community playing a role in shaping the development of Eglinton West and the neighborhoods we call home. Black Urbanism Toronto specifically is focusing on increasing the participation of Black people in community development to advance the collective cultural, economic, and social interests in the neighborhoods we call home. And, I think the issue is with, Eglinton Connects and kind of their plans of coming into the neighborhood, there was a lack of community consultation with community leaders that have been, living in the neighborhoods. And, it's the lack of engagement, the lack of cultural understanding. For us, that's where a lot of the concerns lay, is that the lack of community engagement has really, expedited that kind of cultural gentrification and displacement.
Right. And I've seen this myself. As you know, I've spent a lot of time in Little Jamaica trying to understand the lay of the land, if you will. Do you feel that community engagement from government, from companies like Metrolinx, is the key to moving these sort of projects along successfully?
I mean, I think ultimately what needs to happen, yes, totally. And I think what ultimately needs to happen is that there needs to be an implementation of culturally safe engagement forms where community leaders, residents, business owners, they can participate in, advocating for their community and their specific constituencies. I think it's important from that perspective that when Metrolinx do plan to, redevelop these neighborhoods, that these community leaders and these community individuals who have been living in the neighborhoods are in alignment with their plan. Like that needs to be the core focus of the development of their plans.
Right. And I think at the same time, just myself again from being there and talking to business owners, I think a lot of folks feel like more attention needs to be given to their challenges. I know that the MPP for the area, Jill Andrew, last year had tabled a motion asking for funding for businesses in Little Jamaica. Do you think measures like that will help?
I think so, because I think that creates the equilibrium, right? And a fair economy and allows them to participate in the economy. The property value of that community was built off of Little Jamaica's backs. That's what has made that neighborhood attractive. And if we're creating an equilibrium and a fair economy, I think that has to be a part of the due process. We can't say, this neighborhood's, really attractive. We want to redevelop this neighborhood, but we don't want to acknowledge the reason and the rationale as to why this property value has increased. I think creating those levies where business owners are compensated, and then as a part of the development of that process, it really identifies the contributions that these Black businesses have provided to Toronto, and the development of Toronto.
Right, and this is personal to you. This is your community. It's the community you grew up in.
For sure. Like my grandmother lives in Vaughan and Winona. My mom went to George Harvey.
These are all streets in Little Jamaica.
all streets and schools in Little Jamaica, right? My mom went to Vaughan Road Academy. I grew up there. You know, for me personally, being a Jamaican Canadian, and as my parents would call me, a Jafaican, a fake Jamaican, the only way I was able to participate in Caribbean culture was being in Little Jamaica.
And through your community.
Exactly, and through the community, and that's exactly through the community.
That's fair, and I completely understand. I've had similar experiences. We're going to pick up just after these messages. Picking back up where we left off, we have got Dane Williams, co-founder of Black Urbanism Toronto. Dane, we were just chatting before the break about the personal connection you have to the community, Little Jamaica. Can you go into more detail for us?
Yeah. So, you know, for me personally, my, upbringing was, I was born in Little Jamaica. I was born in the neighborhood. My grandmother, when she immigrated to Canada, landed on Vaughan and Oakwood, which is a street just 5 minutes away from, that kind of commercial business strip. My mother went to the high schools in the area. For me personally, when we moved out of Little Jamaica and a little bit, outside of that main district, it was complex because I was in a community that may not necessarily look like me. And for me to get a feel of that touch, a sense of culture, I actually, would travel to Little Jamaica to get, see the sidewalk vendors, fresh coconut water, mangoes, jerk chicken, just for me to have that feeling of Jamaican hospitality and that back home feeling. For me, it was a way where I can have a sense of identity and culture.
Right.
And a lot of my elders and the relationships that I was able to build was really, a key instrument in the development of myself. Like my barber, Martin, shout out to Pure Vibes. I've been visiting his barbershop since I was 14. And, he's a God-fearing man with a wife and kids and an entrepreneur. And to speak to a elder Black man who I could visibly relate to and get understanding.
That was important to you.
Super important for me. Like was so core and instrumental.
So touching on that, how do you feel the Little Jamaica community in Toronto contributed to where you are now? I know you just touched on this a little when you talked about your barber, local restaurants. When you look at as far as you've come, do you feel that those roots have brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, for sure, because what's playing in my mind is when I had a lot of, when there were things that were going on in my life that were difficult to cope with, or for me to understand as a young adult, that's where I went. I went there for guidance, for understanding, to feel comfortable relaying messages or information that in otherwise shape or form I wouldn't be comfortable providing to other individuals. So it was really a safeguard for me to just be unapologetically myself and understand that I was going to be dealt with care. And I don't think there's there's limited spots for Black people to engage and feel that way. And I think that's what's so important to, that's what community, that's the essence of community, right?
Right. And I'll say this, from what I know of Little Jamaica, Bob Marley actually frequented the community at one point in his life.
Bob Marley back in the 70s and 80s, like again, right? Jamaica's imported their culture, particularly reggae music. Little Jamaica is the second largest hub of reggae music after Kingston, Jamaica. So it just talks about the legacy, and you just question why something like this isn't celebrated in the city of Toronto and Canada worldwide.
Right, which is why your organization worked very hard to have the location named officially Little Jamaica, designated by City Council in Toronto.
Correct. So we're continuously working on, we've been able to pass motions on getting that cultural distinction. Now it's really up to the BIAs to follow suit with what's been recognized from those motions to now officially name the area Little Jamaica and put it on the map.
Right, right. And again, touching on your personal connections, again, you mentioned your barber. I know, of course, there's local restaurants, there's grocery stores. Do you
Mhm.
feel that those businesses are thriving right now, or are you concerned about them?
Yeah, I mean, great question again, Vonnie. I'm really concerned because it seems that there's a strategic push to erase these these legacy businesses, and it actually speaks to it in the Eglinton Connects plan. It talks about revitalization of an urban area, and if you look into the Eglinton Connects plan, there's actually no acknowledgement of the culture that actually remains currently in the neighborhood. So when you're looking at all these policy tools and these procedural mechanisms that are developed by at a city, provincial, and federal level, you're looking into these policies and you're saying, wait, how does it actually take into consideration the current population and demographics that reside in the neighborhood
Right.
today?
Again, we're talking about community consultation and engagement. I think those are very important measures that need to take place when these things happen. Again, we're going into commercial, but just after these messages, we'll pick right back up. While we're here discussing advancing Canada's Black community, we have a special guest with us, Dane Williams from Black Urbanism Toronto. We've been speaking about a multitude of issues that affect the community. Dane, for the people who may not understand this, and maybe for no reason other than not having lived in a similar setting like Little Jamaica, describe what you think happens when there's an erosion of local community around you, and particularly what happens to children of color.
Yeah, loaded and great question. Vonnie, you're coming with some hard-hitting questions this morning.
That's what we do.
I know.
The
That's
name
what
of the show is Tough Topics, okay? We got to ask tough questions.
And I'm happy you're asking these questions because nobody wants to ask these questions and no one wants to actually talk about the elephant in the room, which is, what you just kind of spoke to is the creation of displacement and when there's no connection and visibility of thyself, of being able to look in the community you live in and say, this is my place in this neighborhood. This is my place in this city. This is where I can go to when I feel safe. That kind of snowballs into, much more. I don't want to say like toxic behavior, but it's kind of just like when there isn't that place of self-identity, individuals now feel fearful, they feel threatened, and it's kind of you're just almost in survival mode. So you're like, how am I going to survive in a neighborhood or in an area or in a community that doesn't acknowledge my Blackness and my sense of self? And, I think that's where the void comes from. Like, we have to understand we're human beings. And when we feel when we have self of identity and we're able to participate with individuals who uniquely are like us and identify in the similar things that you do, it creates this sense of self and resiliency and wanting to be there. I think when you start displacing communities and you start eroding culture, you really get into a problematic setting where it's kind of like, fight or flight, survival mode. Individuals are fearful. They're looking at, how am I going to be able to live? Where am I going to live? Like basic human rights, right? And I think there needs to be a larger discussion of topic and understanding of, this isn't just a conversation of, oh, this is prime real estate. This is how do we, create additional revenues and funding for Toronto. Because on the back end, if you're just thinking with for-profit understanding, there's community that's suffering that's going to ultimately affect that bottom line. So a balance of both is truly important.
And to that point, I mean, and I'm merely just asking the question because I know you yourself have done a lot of community consultation with some of these stakeholders. Where does your various orders of government come into play when these things are happening? Have you found success speaking to your MP, your MPPs, your councillors?
That's a good question. And here's the thing. I think, to be honest with you, in some circumstances, yes. In many circumstances, no. And I think because there's And I just want to be thoughtful in how I'm speaking. But I think, it's nice to talk about systemic anti-Black racism. It's nice to, kind of have mission statements on your website and speak to it loosely. But if we're just looking at the intentionalism that's tied to it, it's lacking. And I think individuals want to speak about it as a buzzword or be able to demonstrate, hey, look, I've done something for the community. I've had conversations with the community. But when we're looking at actual, tangible items that we can point to say this has been done, this has changed, which has created long-term economic resiliency, I don't think anybody can speak to that. And I think that's the issue and that's the concern, is that we talk about it a lot, but there hasn't been actual tangible actions that has really created, those strategies to develop, thriving Black communities.
Well, look, I just ask because that's the purpose of elected officials. We elect them in various communities so that they can advance our interests. So when you speak about some of these issues that you see happening in your community, I just question, where are our elected officials who we've put in those positions to help us through these types of situations? I think it's very important. All that to be said, I understand that there is so much going on, and it's hard because there's no one-size-fits-all blanket solution, because the stuff we're talking about is so complex. But I do believe that one of the keys to success is speaking with those different orders of government and getting them to know what your issues are. We will pick up just after these messages. Dane, we know the Liberals have dedicated several $1 million in funding for Black businesses in the midst of the pandemic last year. Do you think that's enough?
I don't think that's enough, because again, I think that there needs to be a proper infrastructure that's going to be developed that's connected in anticipation revitalization of community development. There needs to be strategies intentionally address the economic needs and the unique assets of Black communities that identify opportunities to ensure the long-term economic resiliency, especially in the context of future development. So I don't think throwing money at a problem is the correct solution, because again, we want to create, sustainable infrastructures that's going to allow future agents, youth, to be able to participate and develop. I think there needs to be more, again, of actual intentional interaction and community consultation and conversations. Like, these programs are just kind of built out as, oh, there's an issue, there's a gap, let's just throw money at the problem and that's going to correct itself. But again, there's no actual care, facilitated in develop economic plans and strategy, and tying it to culture and events that's going to create, again, a flowing amount of money and funds in the community and development, right? So right. It's just not sustainable, and it kind of almost seems as if it's created intentionally to say, we've done something. Look, see, we've done something. So now we can
move on.
Exactly.
Yes, no, I would agree. I think throwing money at a problem is never the solution, because, again, it is so complex and there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. I think that there's a lot of moving parts. Money's a part of it, but it's certainly not all of it. Dane, I'm going to do something unique here, with it being a new year, Black History Month all throughout February. What are your 3 wishes for 2022 where Black community advancement is concerned?
For sure. I think that's a great question. And in my mind, I'm going to phrase it as, what are 3 things we are going to do and going to ensure happens in our Black communities? We're going to speak it into existence, Vonny. And I think, one of the number one things is, again, I've said this multiple times, but building a foundation for Black communities to ensure every Black person in Canada can thrive and all Black communities have agency in defining their own future. The terms must be defined by people in the communities and not identified by gatekeepers that have been appointed to represent Black communities. So specifically residents, business owners, community leaders who live in the neighborhood to have the ability to participate in the development of their community. Number two would be Black communities having a sustainable economic development strategy that is implemented in parallel with the anticipated revitalizations of all community developments. The strategy must be intentionally addressed to address the economy, the needs, and the assets unique to Black communities, and identifying opportunities to ensure the long-term economic resiliency. And three, no more programs, especially when the people or the organizations running the social programs oftentimes do not look like us. We need to build back by implementing an infrastructure plan that focuses on providing Black youth access to skills that will allow them to participate in the local economy. More specifically, access to industries that traditionally do not have Black participants. So urban planning, architecture, public policy, the skills trade sector. And you know what? Overall, I would say access to education is a huge equilibrium to creating a fair economy. And we have to look at the overall educational system as our current structure needs to be overhauled because it doesn't provide these opportunities, and it's really developed and founded off Eurocentric ideologies, which if we pride ourselves as Canadians who are multicultural and engaging of different cultures, then our education system needs to reflect that.
Wow. A lot there, but all very important stuff. I appreciate you, Dane Williams. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much, Vonny, as always.
Take care.
Take care.
A riveting conversation indeed, but that's why this show exists, to tackle tough topics that are key to moving communities, people, and country forward. Communities of color need to be able to take pride in their communities, but they need resources to do it. And as we heard here today, it's not just money, it's cultural understanding, empathy, and engagement. So for all of you at home, thank you again for watching. And as always, all voices matter.